Or we have a few questions concerning your preferences. First, should we ask permission before approaching opposing counsel, witnesses, and the bench?
You should ask permission before asking to approach witnesses or the bench.
And may we move freely about the well during statements and examinations?
Yes, you may.
And may we assume that all objection arguments are heard outside the ears of the jury?
Yes.
Next, we have a few documents to tender to the bench for your honor's reference. These include pretrial documents, case law, and the Midland Tools of Evidence.
Has counsel for the defense seen these documents?
Yes, the opposing counsel has seen these. May my co-counsel approach at this
Yes,
time?
you may bring these up.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of witnesses with the exception of party representatives.
I will invoke Rule 615 constructively.
And we would also like to invoke Rule 603, the prior swearing in of all witnesses.
No objection. That's fine. Yes, we can do that.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed with opening statements.
Okay. Does counsel for the defense have any preliminary matters?
A few, Your Honor. First, we ask the court take note that Danny Kozak will be remaining at counsel table as she is a party representative. Next, we ask her preferences as far as receiving a courtesy copy when entering evidence.
I would like to, the bench, well, I tell you what, do we already have the courtesy copies in this binder that was provided by the plaintiff? Or are there additional documents that we might receive?
Of any potential exhibits to be entered into evidence, Your Honor.
Yes, we would like a courtesy copy at the same time that it's tendered to be entered into evidence, so not until that time.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, we ask your preferences as far as treating the judge and the jury as one and the same.
You should do that.
And finally, we have a few judicial matters to draw the court's attention to. If the court could note a few pieces of case law. The first we'll be referring to is on page 3 of the relevant case law under agency, Deere versus Londo Manufacturing. It states that traditional principles of agency law provide that a corporation is charged with knowledge or any fact learned by its agents under the scope of their employment, regardless of whether or not they act on that knowledge. Next, we draw the court's attention to case law Koo v. Sims, which states that proving the defendant owed a duty is not enough to prevail in the negligence case. The plaintiff must also prove that the defendant breached their duty. And finally, we draw the court's attention to the pretrial orders under vicarious liability, which states that the court ruled to hold plaintiff vicariously liable for the conduct of Alex Grace, Jameson Clark, Tony Gomez, Chris Filipana, Ashley Thornhill, and Corey Berry, and that statements made by these above-named individuals shall be imputed to the plaintiff if they occurred on or before June 29th.
Okay. Is that all that you have for preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, before we proceed with openings, does counsel, since I gave counsel for the defense the opportunity to appoint the court for relevant case law, does counsel for the plaintiff wish to do so? You're certainly not required to, but you certainly can if you'd like to, or anything in the pretrial order that you'd like to present to us.
Your Honor, that's our understanding of the case law and the pretrial orders as well.
Okay.
Okay. We would also like to take notice, though, that the pretrial order also states that the defendant had a duty to take reasonable steps to ensure that the chimpanzee would not pose a danger to the plaintiff's employees or the audience, and that the plaintiff has suffered harm as a result of the attack on June 29th.
All right, so noted. When you're ready to proceed with openings, we're ready to hear them.
Yes, Your Honor.
May I please the court? It's June 29th, 2017. The staff of Midland's Television Studios is getting ready for a rehearsal of their talk show. The writers are pitching material, the crew is preparing the set, and there's excitement in the air. Because this rehearsal is going to be different from any other. This time, there's going to be a chimpanzee appearing on the show. But you'll hear today that that chimpanzee is much more dangerous than anyone thinks. You'll learn that it's capable of killing someone. You'll hear that it's been acting aggressively all morning. And you'll find out that if it decides to attack, it's too strong for anyone to to stop. The rehearsal starts, and at first, everything is going according to plan. But then the chimpanzee gets angry. It darts towards one of the people in the room, knocks her to the ground, and hits her over and over again, and no matter how hard she fights, the chimpanzee is stronger. Chris Villafana bleeds to death on that floor, and there is nothing that anyone can do to stop it. But there is one person who could have prevented it. The owner of that chimpanzee, the person who decided to bring it on that set, the person whose job it was to do this right or not do it at all. The defendant. And that's why we're here in court today pursuing a claim of negligence. Now, we have to prove that claim to you today, but some of what we have to prove is undisputed. You see, everyone here agrees the defendant had a duty to make sure that her chimpanzee would not pose a danger to anyone. So we just have to show you that she failed to do that and ultimately caused this tragedy. And you'll learn today that the defendant is actually suing the studio for negligence as well, making this a case of something called comparative negligence. And that just means that at the end of this trial, you'll be asked to decide who is more responsible for what happened. The studio or the defendant. And if we can show you that it's more likely than not that the defendant is responsible for all of this happening, we'll have proven our case to you today. And we'll prove that case by calling 3 witnesses to that stand. First, you'll hear from Alex Grace, the host of the show. And she'll tell you that when the defendant asked for an appearance on the show, she never said how dangerous it would be. Nothing will go wrong. I promise my chimpanzee would never hurt anyone. Those were the guarantees made by the defendant. The promises she could not keep. Next, you'll hear from an expert in primatology, Dr. Hawkins. He'll explain that when the defendant brought a chimpanzee on that set, she chose to bring one that wasn't safe to perform. He'll tell you that the defendant put everyone's lives at risk when she didn't do this right, and she shouldn't have done it at all. And finally, you'll hear from another guest on the show, Mr. Remy Hollis. And he'll tell you about the chimpanzee's aggressive behavior in the hours leading up to the rehearsal. Behavior that the defendant knew about, but ignored. Members of the jury, when safety is disregarded, people get hurt. And that's exactly what happened here. The defendant didn't do her job right, and as a result, someone died. And the studio was left to bear the consequences of the defendant's decisions when the show that they had been working on for 5 years was canceled. So throughout this trial today, remember that when the defendant took other people's lives in her hands, she had a responsibility to do it right. But you'll hear today that she didn't do this right, and she shouldn't have done it at all. And that's why, at the end of this trial, we'll ask you to find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Counsel for the defense, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Today's case is about a television program, Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. A program that had little regard for safety, professionalism, or rules. The only thing that mattered to Midlands After Dark was the television show's ratings. And that's because to MTS, the ratings ruled. Now,
Danny Kozak, an animal trainer, was asked to make a guest appearance on Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. Danny often made guest appearances with her chimpanzee Elias with tremendous success. Unfortunately, on June 29, 2017, after a series of broken rules and empty promises, the tragedy occurred. But that was not Danny Kozak's fault. You see, Midlands Television Studios failed to follow the safety guidelines they were provided. Because of that, it led to the death of Chris Villafana. But you must understand, it is not Chris we are here to discuss today. Today we are here to discuss Danny Kozak's animal sanctuary being closed. Today, we bring forth the claim of negligence. Negligence is the failure to act with the proper amount of care. The plaintiff is bringing negligence as well. Now, that means we both have a burden to prove to you today. That burden is by a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, more likely than not. Today we will show that it was Midlands After Dark failing to follow those guidelines that led to Danny Kozak's sanctuary being shut down. In order to show negligence, we must show you four things: the duty, the breach, the causation, and the harm. Before trial today, everybody in here has already agreed on two of those elements. The duty that MTS owed Danny Kozak to follow those guidelines they were provided. Second, the harm. The harm that Danny Kozak's sanctuary was shut down. Today we will talk about those other two elements. The causation. That it was Midlands After Dark's failure to follow those guidelines that led to Danny Kozak's sanctuary being shut down. And finally, today we will show you that it was MTS was liable on that day because they did not follow those guidelines. We will meet our burden today. To do so, we will call upon three witnesses. First, Ms. Kozak herself will take the stand. Danny will sit right here before you, and she will tell you about the 150 hours of training she completed with Elias. She will tell you about the safety guidelines she provided in order to ensure a safe set for the staff of MTS as well as for Elias. She will tell you every time she had questions, she was encouraged to just go forward with the show in favor of the ratings. Because to Midlands Television Studios, the ratings rule. Second, Ashley Thornhill will take the stand. Ashley is the makeup artist and personal assistant of Alex Grace. Ashley will tell you what it's like to work for Alex. The evidence will show that Ms. Grace consistently focuses on the ratings. Today, Ms. Thornhill will speak to you about how Alex Grace told her specifically, if something happens to Elias on the show, it's all the better for the ratings. Finally, Hunter Cooper will take the stand. Cooper is a jack of all trades, a self-proclaimed Alex superfan. Yet Hunter Cooper is testifying for the defense. Hunter Cooper will tell you what happened on that day when she was able to sit on the set and see for herself. She will tell you how Alex Grace leaned over towards Elias just before the attack. At the end of today's case, my co-counsel, Emily Shai, will come before you and remind you of the facts, the evidence, and the testimony you've been presented today. Once it's been reviewed, one thing will become abundantly clear. Midlands Television Studios did not follow the safety guidelines they were provided, and because of that, Danny Kozak's name lost credibility. She was forced to shut down her sanctuary. Because of that, we ask that you find in favor of the defense and hold Midlands Television Studios liable. Thank you.
All right, counsel, for the plaintiff, I believe you have some witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Alex Grace to the stand. May I proceed? Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
Hi, My name is Alex Grace.
What do you do for a living?
I work in television. My last job was on the show Midlands After Dark as the host.
What was Midlands After Dark?
It was this local late night TV show. Think like Jimmy Kimmel or David Letterman, but on a smaller scale. We weren't giving away cars or anything like that.
What were your responsibilities on that show?
Well, I was the host, so a lot of my work was done on camera. But I was also the executive producer of the show. So I had a lot of other responsibilities as well. I was in charge of the direction of the show, overseeing the writers, and deciding the creative direction that we went in.
And why are you here in court today?
I'm here to talk about what happened on June 29th, 2017. When one of our guests, Danny Kosak, brought her chimpanzee on our show and it killed one of our writers.
How did you first hear about the defendant?
She sent us a few emails that summer. She told us that she needed to appear on our show, that it would literally save
Objection, Your
her.
Honor. See facts, not evidence.
Response?
Your Honor, this witness is putting those facts into evidence.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
So what did the defendant say in those emails?
Well, she told us that she needed this appearance. She said that it was going to save her animal sanctuary and her career.
And what did you do after you got these emails?
Well, we like to help local businesses whenever we could, so I told her she could come on the show.
After you agreed to book the defendant on your show, did you do anything to prepare?
Yes, of course. Ms. Kosak sent us this list of safety guidelines to follow for performance, so we turned our attention to making sure that those were followed.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel with those safety guidelines. Permission to approach the witness. Do you recognize what I just handed to you?
These are the safety guidelines that Ms. Kosak sent us.
Is that a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time I offer Exhibit 23 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
And at this time, Your Honor, I'd like to publish to the jury. And give Your Honor a
Thank you.
copy. So what did you do after you received these guidelines?
I sent them to everyone on our staff. If I saw any of these guidelines being broken, I would have canceled the appearance.
And do those guidelines say anything about having a safety meeting?
Yes. It says right here at the top that Ms. Kosak was going to come in and have a safety meeting with our staff, but she never scheduled a time to do that. So we just followed what these guidelines told us to do.
Well, I'd like to talk to you for a moment about a few of those guidelines in particular. What did guideline number 1 tell you to do?
It says that no other animals should be present on set.
And did you follow this guideline?
Yes. My niece sometimes brings a cat onto set when she comes to visit me, but they were out of town that day, so that wasn't a problem. And I didn't see any other animals on set during the rehearsal.
And what does guideline number 2 tell you to do?
It says, brush your teeth and wash your hands. Please avoid eating or touching food for at least 1 hour before meeting Elias, the chimpanzee.
And did you follow this guideline?
Yes. I was the only person who was going to be meeting Elias, so I made sure not to eat or touch any food that day.
Miss Grace, now I'd like to talk to you about that day, June 29th. How did that day start for you?
It started off normal. I went to go talk to Ms. Kosak, see how she was feeling before the show.
And what happened when you were talking with the defendant?
While I was talking to her, I noticed that she had these scratches all down her arm. So I asked her about them. I asked her if her chimpanzee had scratched her.
And how did the defendant respond?
She wouldn't look me in the eye, and she just wouldn't give me a straight answer.
And did you see the chimpanzee in the room?
Yes, I remember because it It was in this cage in the corner of the room, and I took a few steps towards it, and it just started screaming at me. And it jumped up on the bars of its cage.
What did you do when the chimpanzee started screaming and jumped up on the bars of its cage?
Well, after I saw that, I asked Ms. Kosak if we needed to cancel the appearance. But she said, absolutely not. We're not doing that. I promise that nothing will go wrong. My chimpanzee will never hurt anyone.
With everything that happened, why didn't you cancel the appearance?
I believed Ms. Kosak. She was supposed to be the animal expert. So when she told me that nothing would go wrong, I believed her.
Did something go wrong?
Yes. We went onto the stage and we started the rehearsal. I was interviewing the chimpanzee like we had planned. When all of a sudden it jumped up on its chair and it just started screaming again.
And what did the chimpanzee do next?
It bolted off of its chair and it ran straight towards one of our writers, Chris. It knocked her to the ground and it just started hitting her over and over again. Felt like Chris was never going to stop screaming. She was trying to get it off, but it just wouldn't stop.
Was anyone able to stop that chimpanzee?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, this is not a leading question. I'm asking a yes or no question, but the witness is free to respond either way.
When I overrule the objection, you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Was anyone able to stop that chimpanzee?
No. No one could stop it. Chris just kept screaming. And everything just went silent. Chris died that day.
And what happened after this attack?
Everything fell apart. We couldn't come back from what happened, so we had to cancel the show. We had been working on Midlands After Dark for 5 years. Chris had been with us since the very beginning. We couldn't come back from it. Everything was gone, just like that.
Miss Grace, would you ever have had that chimpanzee appear on your show if you knew how dangerous it was?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, leading.
I'm going to sustain as to leading. Can you rephrase?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Grace, why did you decide to have that chimpanzee on your show?
Ms. Kosak told us that it would be safe. She never told us how dangerous that chimpanzee really was. And if she had, I never would have had them on the show.
Thank you. No further questions. Permission to approach the witness to retrieve evidence.
We have cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Have a seat. Good afternoon, Ms. Grace. My name is Dylan Fink, and I will be asking you a couple of questions today. Now, I'd like to start at the very beginning. Danny Kosak contacted you first, that's correct?
Yes.
And after Danny contacted you, you didn't respond, did you?
No, not for a few months. But eventually she just contacted us so many times that we decided to let her on the show.
You, in fact, did not contact her until you found out how popular the chimpanzee Elias was. That's correct.
Yeah, I didn't know who she was at first. And then I saw a few videos of Elias online, and I saw the emails that she sent us, and I thought that it would be fine to have her on the show.
Now, Ms. Grace, you would agree with me that Midlands After Dark's ratings before the June 29th appearance were the lowest that you had ever seen as a television host. Is that correct?
The lowest that I had seen as the host of Midlands After Dark, but we had a really consistent viewer base. It was really only 2 or 3 points below our normal. We were the most popular show on our network.
Ms. Grace, you communicated with Danny Kosak via email, did you not?
Yes,
And you would recognize these emails if they were shown to you today in court, wouldn't you?
I would.
Your Honor, may the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel what has been marked as Exhibit 8 for purposes of identification. Would Your Honors like a courtesy copy?
Well, wait until you enter it.
And permission to approach the witness. Now, Ms. Grace, I have just handed you what has been marked as Exhibit 8. This is a copy of an email chain that you exchanged between Danny Kosak and yourself, is it not?
Yes.
And it hasn't been changed or altered in any way.
No.
And it is a true and accurate copy.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offers Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, as this is a statement of their party opponent.
Okay, it's entered, you can bring a copy up.
Now, Ms. Grace, in this exhibit, you tell Danny Kosak that if she does not bring the chimpanzee Elias onto the set, that she will not be able to make an appearance on Midlands After Dark. That's correct.
Yes. We told her that she could come if she brought her chimpanzee. I hadn't seen any of her other animals. So I told her that was all we wanted. And if she didn't bring that, then I didn't want her on the show.
So bringing Elias specifically was a requirement to appear on the show.
Yes, I told her that we wanted a chimpanzee to do tricks on our show.
Now, Danny Kosak also sent you a list of guidelines, correct?
Yes.
And you did not make sure that everyone, all of your employees at Midlands Television Studios, had a copy of that guideline, did you?
No, I did. I sent them out to everyone on our staff. And I sent them out through listserv. And so it showed me that everyone opened that email.
But you did not specifically check with every single employee, did you?
I didn't go out and individually check with every employee, but I saw the listserv data, and it said that everyone had opened that email.
And you did not hold a team meeting with the employees of Midlands Television Studios, did you?
No. Danny Kosak told us that he was going to do that, so I was waiting for him.
And you also did not check to ensure that everyone had comprehended the guidelines, did you?
No. I was waiting for Danny Kosak's safety meeting.
Ms. Grace, you are not available to take any questions about the safety precautions, were you?
I wouldn't say that. If someone had a question, they were free to come to me.
Danny Kosak, in fact, had questions, didn't he? Didn't she? Excuse me.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Danny Kosak had asked you questions about the safety precautions on June 29th, didn't she?
I'm sorry. Can you clarify?
Your Honor, a brief moment to confer with co-counsel. Now, Danny Kosak asked you questions about the production, didn't she?
I'm sorry. What questions?
Just general questions about the productions. You would agree that she asked general questions about the production.
I really don't remember. You'd have to tell me exactly.
Do you recall giving a statement?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach co-counsel with what is the witness's own statement.
You may approach.
Your Honors, would you like a copy of the statement?
Yes.
I will be reading from line 296. Your Honor's permission to approach the witness with her own statement.
Your Honor, we'd just like to object to the that being published to the jury if it's not being entered into evidence.
All right. So noted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, I've just handed you what is your statement. This is a true and accurate copy, is it not?
Yes, it looks like a copy of the deposition that was
Or
entered.
your deposition, excuse me. And this is your signature, is it not?
Yes.
And in this statement, you said, and I'll be reading from lines 296, and I will read the question on 295 as well. This says, please read silently as I read aloud. What happened after you and Cossack got to craft services? And you specifically state, we talked for a bit more. I remember Cossack asking some questions about the production. But before I could answer, I saw Hollis hovering around. I could tell what Hollis wanted to talk, so I referred Cossack to some of my team members while I dealt with Hollis. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't remember exactly what questions he was asking me.
So she did ask you questions about the production. That's correct.
Yes, during when I met with him on the day of the rehearsal.
And you did not respond to those questions, did you?
He was asking me some questions, and I responded to them.
In fact, you deferred Danny Cossack to go talk to somebody else, didn't you?
I'm not sure what you want to do.
You would agree with me that you would agree with me that any employee who had questions about the document deserved to be fired. Would you agree?
Well, I said that the guidelines as they were written were straightforward. And I thought that if there were any questions about them, that maybe they wouldn't, that maybe they shouldn't be working on our show. But I never said that to my staff. It was just something that I was saying about the guidelines themselves.
So that's a yes. If someone had a question about the guidelines, they deserve to be fired.
That's what I said in my deposition, but again, I never said that to my staff.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm just going to need a yes or no responses for the court reporters, so that's a yes.
Yes.
Ms. Grace, I'd like to talk about the dress rehearsal itself on June 29th. You would agree with me that the interview started and was a bit boring. Would you agree?
I wouldn't say that, no.
You don't agree that you felt that it was a bit boring?
I didn't think it was boring while I was doing the interview, no.
Do you recall giving a statement?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel with the witness's deposition.
That's fine.
This will be on line 341. Your Honor, permission to approach the bench.
Well, we've already got it up here. If you just want to point out to me what I'm looking at.
Your Honor, on line 341, the witness says specifically.
No, you don't, just tell me the line. Okay, 341?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness.
You may.
I've just handed you what has been marked as your statement, or as your deposition. This is your deposition, is it not?
Yes.
And please read silently as I read aloud. I will be reading from 340 to 342. What happened after you all sat down was the question. The answer was, the interview began. I asked for the background questions. Cossack answered, it was a bit boring, but everything was going fine. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought that you were talking about the interview as a whole. Obviously, I wasn't bored by the time the chimpanzees started screaming.
But you would agree with me that at the beginning, the dress rehearsal was a bit boring.
At the beginning, yes.
Ms. Cossack, or Ms. Grace, the chimpanzee started screaming,
Yes.
didn't it, Elias? And you would agree with me that Danny Kosak did nothing to provoke Elias?
No, it just started screaming out of nowhere.
I'd like to talk about now after the events of June 29th, after Chris Villafana had already passed away. Now, you sent a letter to Harper Villafana, didn't you?
Yes, after the show got canceled, I was unemployed for a few months, and I sent a letter to Chris Villafana's husband, Harper.
And you would recognize that letter if it was shown to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach opposing counsel. Exhibit 20. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness. Now, Ms. Grace, I've just handed you what has been marked as Exhibit 20. This is the letter that you sent to Harper Villafana, is it not?
Yes.
And it is a true and accurate copy.
Yes.
And it hasn't been changed or altered in any way, has it?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense now offers Exhibit 20 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Okay, give me the explanation for why it's hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor, this contains multiple out-of-court statements that are being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. This witness has just testified that she wrote this letter after the events of June 29th, and that vicarious liability pretrial order only deals with statements that were made before or on June 29th. She wrote this letter after June 29th, after the show had been canceled and she was no longer working for Midlands Television Studios. She just testified she was unemployed at the time, so therefore this does not fit underneath the 801D2D exception.
Your Honor.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. Alex Grace is still operating under the employment of Midlands Television Studios, which is the defendant, not simply Midlands After Dark. So her not being employed by Midlands After Dark specifically is not the deciding factor. Furthermore, under vicarious liability, it is the position of the trial jury to decide whether to impute the evidence. Furthermore, this is an admission by a party opponent, as Alex Grace is the party opponent in this matter.
I'm not certain what I heard in the testimony. Is this witness employed currently by Midlands Television Studios?
Your Honor, this witness was employed by Midlands Television Studios and then was fired from Midlands Television Studios when the show got canceled and has only recently been rehired to work on a new show. She just testified that she was unemployed for many months, and that was during the time.
I'm going to stop you here.
Yes,
On
Your
the
Honor.
date that she wrote the letter, was she employed at Midlands Television Studios?
No, Your Honor, she just testified that she was not.
Response on that issue.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to read from the case.
Sure.
As for all other acts, omissions, or statements made by above-named individuals after June 29, 2017, the trial court shall determine whether to impute them to plaintiff.
Your Honor, may I respond on those grounds?
Very briefly.
Your Honor, the trial court should not impute them to the plaintiff because this witness was not an employee of the plaintiff at the time that she wrote these statements. Therefore, they do not fall under the 801D2D exception.
I've heard enough argument. I'm going to overrule the objection and allow her to proceed. You will have an opportunity on redirect if you'd like to go into this.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, in this letter to Harper Villafana, you specifically state that maybe if listened to rules or said yes to a different animal. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I said. Maybe if Danny Kosak had listened to his rules and held a safety meeting with my staff, this wouldn't have happened.
In fact, it says maybe if listened to rules or said yes to a different animal. That's verbatim, isn't it?
Yes, that's what it says.
And this was an apology letter that you sent to Harper Villafana about your actions, is it not?
I sent this apology to Harper Villafana because I feel so bad about what happened to Chris that day. But
Yep.
what happened was Danny Kosak's fault. She's the one who brought this chimpanzee onto our show. We followed her guidelines. This was her, not us.
Ms. Grace, you also said verbatim, sorry again, I let everyone down. That's correct.
Yes, I feel so bad that I didn't vet Miss Kosak more or that I let her onto our show in the first place. I just wanted Harper to know that.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Grace, do you still have the Exhibit 8 and also Exhibit, 20 with you?
Yes.
Now, the letter to Harper Villafana, did you write that letter when you were an employee of Midlands After Dark or Midlands Television Studios?
No. The show got canceled right after the attack, so the studio let me go. I was only recently rehired for a new show. I was unemployed when I wrote this.
Now, Ms. Grace, I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit 8, the emails that you had back and forth with Danny Kosak. Did the defendant ever tell you in that email how dangerous her chimpanzee was?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, this is not a leading question. I'm asking her if the defendant ever said a specific thing in the email. It's a yes or no question.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. So did the defendant ever say in this email how dangerous her chimpanzee was?
No, she never told us. She just told us that she wanted to bring someone else on our show, a different animal, and I told her that we didn't want another animal. We just wanted a chimpanzee.
So was the defendant free to cancel this appearance if she didn't think that her chimpanzee would be safe?
Of course. We never told her that she couldn't cancel the appearance. In fact, we told her multiple times on the day of the attack that she could cancel if she didn't feel ready. But she didn't.
Ms. Grace, if you were trying to improve the ratings of your television show, would you have done anything during a rehearsal?
No. First of all, our ratings were fine. We were the most popular show on our network. And second of all, it doesn't make sense to do something during a rehearsal because the cameras aren't rolling. No one sees our rehearsals. There's no audience there. No one would have seen it.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
May this witness step down.
Pending no recross, then yes.
Your Honor, one question.
Is recross allowed in this jurisdiction?
Yes, Your Honor, within the scope of redirect.
All right.
Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
You are currently employed by Midlands Television Studios, aren't you?
Yes, I am right now, but not when I wrote that letter.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Now may this witness step down.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh.
And permission to publish evidence to the jury? Yes, I believe the witness still has some.
All right, does the plaintiff have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Willoughby Hawkins to the stand.
May I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, before we begin, I ask permission to move and to be able to see the demonstratives.
If any, yes, if any, and just as a standing rule, if there are any demonstratives used, counsel is free to reposition at that time when, but only when these demonstratives are used.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to us?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Willoughby Hawkins. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful when you first hear it, so simply Dr. Hawkins will do.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the chair of the Department of Anthropology for Midland State University.
What kind of educational background do you have?
Well, I received my bachelor's degree in psychology and biological anthropology from UT Chattanooga in the year 1990. And 6 years later, I went on to receive my PhD in animal sciences from the Ohio State University.
Do you have a specialty within the field of animal sciences?
Yes, I most certainly do. My specialty is in primatology, which is the study of primates like chimpanzees.
And have you conducted any research in the field of primatology?
I have, yes. I spent several years conducting field research at a chimpanzee sanctuary in Montclair, New Jersey. And I've also done extensive research in my almost 30-year career into the use of chimpanzees for live television performances.
What was your role in today's case?
Well, it was my role to assess whether or not it was a safe choice for Miss Danny Kosak to bring her chimpanzee Elias onto the set of Midlands After Dark.
How did you determine whether it was safe to bring this chimpanzee on the show?
Well, I utilize what I call the behavioral analysis method, BAM for short. Basically, I take the demographic criteria of the chimpanzee, and from that demographic criteria, I'm able to determine certain behavioral tendencies associated with that criteria, and then determine the risk factor with selecting that particular chimpanzee for live performance.
Is this method standard in your field?
Yes, it is widely accepted. I myself have published over 30 scientific peer-reviewed articles in my field, many of which discuss this method.
And to be clear, did you reliably apply that method in this case?
Yes, absolutely.
And did you have everything you needed to reach a conclusion?
I did, yes. I was given the deposition of Danny Kosak and Alex Grace for review, as well as other witness statements and evidence such as the biography of Elias the chimpanzee and a photo of Elias. Now, these are the typical types of materials that experts in my field rely upon when coming to our conclusions.
Well, why is the choice of chimpanzee important for a live performance?
Well, chimpanzees, or any animal for that matter, can be incredibly dangerous if the wrong one is selected. Now, this is why it is imperative for an animal trainer such as Ms. Kosak to select a chimpanzee that meets the criteria for a safe performance animal. When it comes to selecting animals for live performances, you either do it right or you don't do it at all.
Approaching opposing counsel with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 2. Permission to approach the witness with the same.
Thank you.
Dr. Hawkins, what did I just hand you?
This is a copy of a photo of Elias the chimpanzee that we just talked about.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that photo?
Yes, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Well, other than being put in this nicely laminated folder right here, nothing from what I can see.
All right, this time I offer Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection?
On your honor.
It's admitted.
Permission to approach and with courtesy copies?
Yes. Are you publishing, permission to publish to the jury?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Now, when you first came across this photo, what jumped out at you?
Well, the thing that immediately jumped out at me were Elias's sharp canine teeth, as well as his increased muscle tone and large, broad shoulders. Now, these were all indicators to me that Elias had developed all of his physical features, and that certainly doesn't meet the criteria for a safe performance animal.
Well, what criteria should a chimpanzee meet to be safe for performances?
Well, there are a variety of factors an animal trainer can consider, but we in the field have narrowed it down to 3 that are the most important. That is the chimpanzee's gender, their physical development, and previous behavior on live performances. I actually brought along a neat visual aid to demonstrate that very concept. On it, we have Elias and his relevant characteristics compared to a chimpanzee that meets the criteria for a safe performance animal.
Permission for the witness to step down and make use of his visual aid?
Now, before I show this to the members of the jury, is this the visual aid you brought with you today?
Yes, it is.
Now, let's look at those factors you mentioned earlier. How does Luna's gender make her a safe choice for performances?
Well, Luna the chimpanzee, pictured here, is a female chimpanzee. And female chimpanzees are smaller on average than male chimpanzees and are significantly less likely to respond with violence to perceived threats than their male counterparts. As such, Luna's gender makes her a safe choice for live performance. So to signify that, we're going to put a green check under Luna's picture for being female.
What about the defendant's chimpanzee?
Well, unlike Luna, Elias was a male chimpanzee.
And did being male make aggressive behavior more likely to occur?
Unfortunately, it did. To give you an idea, 90% of the chimpanzee attacks in the United States in the past 5 years have involved male chimpanzees. Bringing a male chimpanzee who possesses the physical tools to attack their victims is not a safe choice. So to signify that, I'm going to put a red X under Elias's picture for being male.
Let's look at the next factor, physical development. How does that impact safety?
Well, this one's pretty simple. Younger chimpanzees who have not entered the puberty stage yet are far less physically developed and don't even possess the physical muscle strength to pose any sort of significant safety threat to humans on set. And this is why a substantial majority of the chimpanzees we see on television are infants, in fact. And much like Luna, pictured here. Luna is just under a year old, which makes her a prime selection for a live television performance, as well as a safe one.
Did the defendant's chimpanzee's age make him a poor choice for performances?
It absolutely did. Elias was 10 years old at the time of the Midlands After Dark appearance, and at 10 years old, chimpanzees possess all of the physical tools of a fully developed chimpanzee. This includes canines and sharp fingernails to be able to attack their victims, as well as the physical dominance and muscle strength over their opponents. Bringing a fully developed chimpanzee onto a set with humans involved was certainly not a safe choice.
Now, looking at the last factor, why is previous behavior important?
Well, this one is the most straightforward. If a chimpanzee has exhibited any previous incidences of aggressive behavior in past performances, they are a huge no-go for future performances. Luna has had no previous aggressive incidents in her performance career. However, I found that Elias did have a previous incident of aggression on a performance. As such, Luna's previous behavior makes her a safe choice, while Elias's previous behavior does not.
Objection, Your Honor. As to be more prejudicial than appropriate, may I be heard?
I'm going to overrule it because the testimony's already come in.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Permission for Dr. Hawkins to return to his seat.
No step down.
Now, a moment ago, you mentioned that the defendant's chimpanzee had a previous aggressive incident. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, in my review of Ms. Kosak's deposition, I was made aware of an incident that took place during a 2015 live performance on the Byron Fellows show. During this performance, Elias started to act up. He was agitated, jumping up and down in his chair, screaming at audience members. I found this to be an incredibly dangerous situation and should have resulted in the retirement of Elias from live performances altogether.
Did you find any evidence from the day of the Midlands After Dark performance that made aggressive behavior more likely?
Unfortunately, I did. Also, in my review of Ms. Kosak's deposition, I came across several instances the day of the rehearsal in which Elias was agitated and needed to be calmed down by Ms. Kosak. This should have been an indicator to Ms. Kosak that something about the set or the environment was causing Elias to be agitated, and he wasn't suitable for the show that day, but unfortunately, Ms. Kosak continued with the performance despite these warning signs.
Did the defendant ever notify the studio that her animal was an unsafe choice?
No, not at all. And that was quite perplexing to me because it's usually standard industry practices for animal trainers, such as Ms. Kosak, to communicate all of the safety risks associated with their animal, but I found no evidence that Ms. Kosak ever did that with Midlands Television Studios.
Dr. Hawkins, in your expert opinion, based on all of these factors, was the defendant's animal a safe choice for an appearance on Midlands After Dark?
Well, based on the factors we just discussed and that are on the board right there, I concluded that Elias was not a safe choice for an appearance on Midlands After Dark. And unfortunately, Ms. Kosak's failure to select a chimpanzee that met the criteria for a safe performance animal put everyone's lives at risk that day.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. I have no further questions at this time. Would opposing counsel like me to deconstruct the demonstrative or leave it up?
Counsel, would you like to do, what would you like to do with this demonstrative?
Deconstruct. Yes, Your Honor. Hello, my name is Jocelyn Jarrett. I'll be asking you a few questions today.
Hello, my name is Dr. Hawkins.
Now, Dr. Hawkins, isn't it correct that you're being compensated to appear in court today?
Well, yes, that is correct. I charge the standard industry rate in my field of $300 an hour for my services.
So for every hour you spent conducting your research, you're being compensated $300, correct?
Yes, that is correct. That is the standard industry rate for experts such as myself.
Additionally, you're being compensated $5,000 to sit in that chair today.
Well, not just to sit in this chair. I opt for a more comfortable one, believe me. But I just time spent away from the office, travel, lodging, etc.
So once again, in order to appear in court today, you're being compensated $5,000.
Yes, for my time spent away from the office and other things.
Now, I would like to move on to your individual research into this case.
Okay.
It is correct that you never interviewed Alex Grace, correct?
No, I did not interview Alex Grace. That's typically not what experts like myself do. I was provided with her sworn deposition statement, so I felt that that was sufficient enough to come to my
And to
attention.
direct you back to my question, not about a deposition, but you never personally interviewed Alex Grace, correct?
No, it's not standard industry practice for experts like myself to interview people like that.
And in addition to not interviewing Miss Grace, you never interviewed a single person that was on set during the attack, correct?
No, as I stated before, that's not standard industry practice to interview people. We're provided with their sworn statements, and that is what we use.
However, you spoke on direct examination that it was industry practice to conduct field research as you have in the past.
To conduct field research in the field of primatology, yes. Being around chimpanzees, learning about the different training methods and the different characteristics of them, yes.
However, you never conducted any field research for today's case, correct?
For today's case specifically, no, but I've done extensive field research in my career.
To direct you back to my question, for today's case, you conducted no field research.
No, I did not go to Ms. Kozak's animal sanctuary to conduct any research of that sort.
Now, in addition to your training, you spoke on direct examination about some factors that determine the chimpanzee you would ideally say should perform on TV, correct?
Well, not what I would ideally say, what the science ideally says. One that's female is less aggressive on average than one that's male, and one that doesn't have...
Objection, I ask that my witness be allowed to finish his answer without being interrupted.
Let the witness finish his answer before you begin talking, please.
Yes, sir.
If you ask the question again, please.
Yes, I asked simply, you stated on direct examination 3 factors that go into choosing a chimpanzee you would say should be selected to perform on television.
Well, again, not what I would say. What the science suggests is the right choice. A chimpanzee that's female is on average less aggressive and less physically developed than one that's male. One that's younger does not possess the physical tools like an older one to be able to attack people, and previous behavior on performances gives you an indicator on how they'll act on future performances. So we want a chimpanzee that does not have any previous aggressive incidents, because then they won't act aggressive in the future.
Dr. Hawkins, we will get to all of that information. I'm simply asking about the 3 factors in today's case. First, I would like to discuss the gender, as you just stated. You've stated that male chimpanzees, on average, could be more dangerous, correct?
Not could be, are more dangerous, because on average, male chimpanzees are significantly more likely to respond with violence than their male counterparts.
However, you have never reported the percentage of chimpanzees on television that are male compared to female, correct?
No, I've not reported that, no.
And so it could reasonably be assumed that a larger number of chimpanzees that appear on television are in fact male, correct?
That could be the case. That could be the case.
In addition, you only reviewed 10 incidents in the last 5 years of incidents where a chimpanzee has become aggressive, correct?
No, that's not correct. I just simply went to the last 5 years. Now, over the course of my 30-year career, I have found that an overwhelming majority of chimpanzee attacks have been committed by males.
However, on direct examination, you made a statement that 90% of chimpanzees that are male, 90% of chimpanzees that attack on live television are male, correct?
I stated that 9 of the 10 in the past 5 years have been male. Over the course of time, male chimpanzees are significantly more likely to attack than females.
But in these last 10 years, or in these last 5 years, I'm sorry, you cannot sit here and tell me if 90% of performance chimpanzees are in fact male, correct?
That is correct.
Now, I would like to go ahead and move on to prior environments. You would agree with me that it would be beneficial for an individual to choose a performance chimpanzee that grew up in the wild, correct?
That grew up in the wild, yes.
And you would agree that Elias, in fact, grew up in the wild?
Yes, I did find that Elias did grow up in the wild. However, Elias was eventually captured and sold to the Hardy compound in 2014. And there he spent his puberty years, which are the most crucial part of a chimpanzee's physical development in human captivity.
However, you would agree that it is important for a chimpanzee to grow up in the wild?
That is important, yes.
As Elias grew up in the wild?
Yes, he spent about half his life in the wild, and then his puberty years, which are the most crucial part of the physical development in human captivity.
Now, I would like to move on to that third point you addressed on direct examination, prior acts of aggression. Now, you spoke a lot about an instance where some behavior took place. However, on the stand today, you cannot say you found any evidence that Elias has ever committed a prior act of aggression previous to the show, correct?
No, that's completely incorrect. He had a previous aggressive incident on the Byron Fellow Show in 2015, in which he was agitated, jumping up and down, and screaming at audience members.
Now, are you telling me that you're sitting on the stand today saying that the television show in which Elias grew agitated, you would consider that to be a prior act of aggression?
Yes, that is correct. Elias was exhibiting very aggressive behavior, screaming at audience members, jumping up and down.
Now, you remember submitting a report, correct?
I do, yes.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel what has previously been marked as, well, Dr. Willoughby's Hawkins report. 1, 2, 3, 1, 6, 1, 6, 2.
Permission to approach a witness with the same.
Nay.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching the witness with his report. Would you like a copy, Your Honor?
I would.
We'll be referencing lines 164. Now, before you came to court today, you completed this report, correct?
Yes, I did. My name is on the top of it.
And you were asked to include all relevant knowledge to today's case in this report.
That is correct, yes.
And you, in fact, when you submitted this report, agree that everything in this report is factual, correct?
It's factual, yes.
Yes. And you would revise this if anything in this was not factual, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I was aware that I was able to revise it up to opening statement.
Now, I'm going to be reading line 164 aloud. Please read silently. Here, there is no evidence that Elias engaged in any violent behavior prior to June 29th. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, that you read that correctly. Any violent behavior. You see, we need to distinguish between what is aggressive and what is violent. Aggressive behavior is including but not limited to, screaming at audience members, jumping up and down. That's what we consider aggressive behavior. Violent behavior is actually attacking somebody, and that's what occurred on Midlands After Dark.
Your Honor,
I have found no evidence. I found no evidence that Elias ever exhibited any violent behavior prior to June 29, 2017, but he did have that previous aggressive incident.
Your Honor, I object to improper impeachment, as the witness just stated that it's not a contradiction to his report.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor, I believe that this was a proper impeachment. In addition, I believe that this individual has been given the opportunity to review this deposition while on the stand.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
And permission to approach a witness and retrieve.
You may.
Now, discussing that aggressive behavior, I would like to determine what you consider aggressive. Isn't it correct that Elias never touched a human on that prior act of aggression you stated?
No, he did not. Thankfully, Ms. Kosak was able to calm Elias down before any violent behavior occurred.
Absolutely. So you would agree that that behavior was a startle reaction, correct?
Yes, I do agree with that.
And in the evidence you reviewed for today's case, you saw that Danny Kozak was able to calm Elias?
Was able to calm Elias down in the Byron Fellow show incident. She obviously wasn't able to calm him down in the Midlands After Dark
However,
incident.
I would like to talk about that first instance. We'll move on in a second. Isn't it correct that Danny Kozak was able to calm Elias from a distance away?
I believe so, that's correct.
Now, I would like to jump ahead to the training that Danny Kozak completed. Now, you would agree with me that it is important to avoid startle reactions through training, right?
Well, it is important to avoid startle reactions through training, yes, if you're going to use a chimpanzee on a live performance. However, the most foolproof way of preventing startle reaction is to select a proper chimpanzee in the first place.
However, you would agree that it is important to avoid stimuli or to train for stimuli that could cause that startle reaction.
Well, yes, it is important, but the most important thing is to select the right animal in the first place.
To direct you back to my question, it's simply a yes or no answer. It is important to train a chimpanzee in front of stimuli that might be present in order for a performance.
Well, yes, that's important.
Now, I would like to ask you, is it correct that Danny Kozak, while performing training to prepare for Midlands After Dark, did in fact use these training techniques to help Elias?
Yes, I did find that Elias was trained under similar, environments to the set, bright lights, that sort of thing.
Finally, if a chimpanzee is in fact experiencing a startle reaction, it is important that nobody makes any sudden movements, correct?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. No one except for the animal trainer should attempt to calm the chimpanzee down.
But that's not what I asked you. I asked you, it is important that there are no sudden movements towards the chimpanzee.
Yes, that's correct.
And during the startle reaction on Midlands After Dark, you found evidence that while Elias was experiencing a startle reaction, Danny Kozak made no sudden movements toward Elias, correct?
I did read 2 reports that stated that. However, I wasn't able to determine the veracity of those claims as I was not there myself, and I wasn't able to get statements from everybody that was there.
And isn't it also correct that if somebody were to make a sudden movement toward Elias, that could cause the aggressive behavior?
Well, it couldn't cause the aggressive behavior. The aggressive behavior is already underway. Now, the Elias could potentially perceive something of that sort as a threat, but the aggressive behavior is already happening.
So I can ask it that way as well. Wouldn't you agree that a sudden movement toward Elias or a chimpanzee during a startle reaction could in fact cause the chimpanzee to become aggressive?
Not to become aggressive, to attack. You see, you have a startle reaction followed by a perception of threat. What you're speaking of could potentially be the perception of threat that could cause the attack.
So you're saying that a sudden movement toward Elias could cause a perception of threat?
Well, it could potentially, but when a chimpanzee's in a startle reaction, anything could be perceived as a threat. A wrong look, a smile, or anything that you're talking about.
I have no further questions at this time, Your
Redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor.
Dr. Hawkins, even though the defendant's chimpanzee had not had any violent incidents prior to June 29th, had he had aggressive ones?
Yes, I did find that the one on the incident that we talked about on the Byron Fellows show was an incident of aggressive behavior.
And did you get information about the defendant's chimpanzee's biographical characteristics from the defendant?
Yes, I did.
And did you need to conduct any interviews or field research to come to a conclusion in this case?
No, not at all. I'm a primatology expert, and primatology experts typically don't interview people of that sort. We're provided with the sworn statements, and that is sufficient.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
And that is witness be excused.
Barring any recross, yes, Your Honor.
No recross, Your Honor.
All right, I believe the plaintiffs have one additional witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Remy Hollis to the stand.
Please introduce yourself to us.
Hey, hi. My name is Remy Hollis. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Where are you from?
Well, if you couldn't already tell, from the city that never sleeps. You know the Big Apple? The concrete jungle. I'm talking about New York City, of course. How lucky I am to be there. It's the center of the entertainment industry, after all.
Do you work in entertainment?
Do I work in entertainment? I've been managing bands for years. I mean, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Mariah Carey. They all wish they could have been managed by me.
All right, sir. How'd you get involved in today's case?
Well, I was supposed to be on this talk show, Midlands After Dark, with an up-and-coming band of mine, the Hound Dogs. They were so good. We was going to make Woodstock look like a third-grade talent show, let me tell you. But fortunately, we never got to appear that day.
How come you never got to appear?
We was on the set for the show, and this chimpanzee they had on set that day went crazy. Killed one of the writers for the show. It was one of the most awful things I've ever seen.
Sir, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you saw in the studio that day. Now, when exactly did you get to the studio on the day of the attack?
Well, let's see. It was bright and early, about 11 a.m.
Why exactly were you there early?
Well, you know, I got a saying in show business. You either do it right or you don't do it at all. Just like my mom taught me. So since the studio let us in early, figured I'd get a chance to settle in, you know, get the band to arrive, make sure none of those wise guys was going to try anything weird on me.
Sir, did you see anything unusual in the studio that day?
Yeah. You know, I was walking about the hallways, and all of a sudden I hear screaming coming from the room next door. I see Danny Kozak's name on the door, and I peeked in to see what was causing all the ruckus.
What did you see?
Oh, I see this chimpanzee screaming, grabbing the bars of the cage, and screaming on the top of its lungs like my mom when I don't go home for the holidays. It was terrifying.
Sir, after you saw this chimpanzee screaming, did you ever see it get moved out of that dressing room?
Oh, yeah, about an hour and a half later, I seen them moving the chimpanzee down the hallways away. It's still in its cage, thank God.
Did you see the defendant around while that was happening?
Oh, yeah, the animal trainer. He was down the hallways away, you know. He was on a phone call. He was talking a mile a minute. Seemed nervous to me.
What did the
Objection, Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
Response.
Your Honor, the witness just testified that he saw the defendant on this phone call, that he was pacing up and down the hall, that he was talking a mile a minute. It's completely within his rationally based perception to say that he looked nervous.
I'm going to overrule the objection. He can testify within his personal observations.
So what did you hear the defendant say on this phone call?
Oh, well, yeah, he was going on and on about, you know, I got a bad feeling about this.
Objection, Your Honor, at this point to Rule 403, this testimony is more prejudicial than it is probative. Because we have no understanding of the context of the conversation in which Ms. Kosak was speaking, hearing these fragments of statements will highly prejudice the jury.
What's your response on that?
Your Honor, before I respond, may I just proffer the statements for the clarification of the court?
Yes, let's proffer those, we're assuming the jury has been set up.
Of course, Your Honor.
Jury, we instruct you not to hear these.
The specific statements we anticipate the witness will testify to are phone call statements from the defendant, where she says that she has a bad feeling about this and she just can't shake this feeling.
And we don't know the context of the conversation.
We don't know the context of the conversation, Your Honor, but that goes to weight, not admissibility. It's up to the jury to decide how much weight they give to the conversation, given the context of the call, but ultimately it's still probative if the witness did feel that he was nervous about the performance going forward.
And the foundation as far as what the witness knows about that call is he's already testified to, correct?
Yes, he's already testified that that phone call was being made while the chimpanzee was being brought on the set for the performance.
I've heard enough. I'm going to sustain your 4 and 3 argument. So thank you for the proffer, but we won't be going into this. Jury, you're magically back in the room. You can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Sir, did the defendant go on with the performance after pacing up and down the hall on the phone?
Oh, yeah, right after that, they took Furious George there towards the set of the show.
Well, so then let's talk about what you actually saw on the set that day. Now, sir, who was on set to start this rehearsal?
Let's see, there was Alex Grace, of course, there was that animal, there's the animal trainer. There's a few writers walking about, but no cameraman or lighting crew or anything like that. It was just a rehearsal, there was no production going on.
Now, did anything change over the course of this rehearsal?
Everything started off pretty all right. The chimpanzee was doing this act, and then, he got up on his chair. He started screaming like he did before.
Sir, what did you do when you saw that happen?
I was like, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is way more than I bargained for. I was just there to play some music. So I turned around and tried to get out of there as soon as I could. Before I could, I started hearing the screaming again, and it brought me right back into the room.
Sir, who did you hear screaming?
This time I looked back and I seen this poor girl, one of the writers for the show, Chris Villafana. She was getting attacked by that animal. This chimpanzee was biting and clawing at her.
Objection, Your Honor. This is more prejudicial than it is probative. May I be heard?
No, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Were you finished with your answer, sir?
The chimpanzee was biting and clawing at her. It was going on forever. And the animal trainer couldn't do nothing to stop it. And then, after a while, the screaming stopped and it was over.
Sir, you just mentioned that the defendant didn't do anything to stop it. What exactly did the defendant do when that chimpanzee was attacking?
She was standing there for what felt like forever. And when she tried to pull the chimpanzee off, it was no use. That chimpanzee was too big and too strong.
Could you get that chimpanzee off?
Not in time to save Chris Villafana.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination.
Briefly, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I inquire as to how much time is remaining?
Time check for, okay.
Currently,
It's going to be a pretty fast cross-examination.
Yes, Your
37
Honor.
seconds, so have at it.
I have 33 seconds, so there's just a 4-second discrepancy. That's it.
We'll go with the 37.
Of course, Your Honor.
Slight margin
So
of
that's
error.
the difference, right? 33 versus 37?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a slight margin of error.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Hollis, nobody from MTS checked with you that you had read the safety guidelines, did they?
Oh, no, I didn't need to. These guidelines said something about an animal. I was only there for my band. I didn't need to read.
So that was a yes. Nobody checked to make sure you had read them?
No, I didn't need to.
And nobody spoke with you about safety at all on that day, did they?
No, I don't think so. My band was going on later that day.
In fact, prior to your arrival, you didn't even know a chimpanzee was going to be there, did you?
Well, as soon as I got there, I heard it all right. Yeah, I knew it was going to be there right as soon as I got there.
But that was a yes, you didn't know.
Well, when I...
Time.
It was,
All right. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Sir, did the studio send you the guidelines before you came on the show?
Oh, yeah, I'd gotten them in an email. They came from the talent booker for the show.
Thank you. No further questions?
All right. We're going to take a brief break. We will be back at 4:35 if we do this one.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the plaintiff, I had 2337. For the crosses, we did 25. So
Yeah, I had 2358, so
a little bit of difference there, but still it's not.
Yeah. It was
We don't
interesting.
disagree with the fact that one over. So it's
Yeah.
fine. All right. Thank you. John.
No worries.
There are also restrooms upstairs, if the lines, I mean, you're a guy, y'all won't have a lot of line in the restroom. You won't even know what that's like.
And this is the thesis that she did 2 years ago. I should give you that. She outlined this entire thing. But I didn't even look at it when I was writing. She's so amazing. I heard about it. I still can't tell.
So after they give you the foundation of why I made that comment earlier, we just got an email that said it's 18 days away. I'm sorry. Can't do that.
Spring break is 18 days
They're
away?
actually graduating the Wednesday, Thursday.
But still,
before.
that's
But
awfully
I
close.
can't believe it.
Yeah. Wow. But that, somewhere in Italy are they going?
I don't know.
Reminds me of my dad, when we were in high school, my sister had gone somewhere. I don't remember where. She was gone for like a week. And she called home and she said something. I was just calling to check in. Dad went, "Where are you? Are you not here?" He didn't even know she was gone.
Where was she?
She was like at cheerleader camp or somewhere or another. But he didn't even realize she was not in the house. I mean, so he just wrote checks, you know.
I know the feeling.
When you have girls, as you know, when you have girls, it just kind of goes like that. What?
They not put the time, their objections or is that?
No, objections stop the clock.
So that's why they could be a discrepancy, so I
Yeah.
keep looking up.
Yeah, somebody can hit, yeah. But that also means we could be here forever if we don't cut the objections down, which is what we're trying to do here. Wow, so we're, I tell you what, that would be a lot of fun. Can we go to Italy? Right. Well, surely they've got enough chapters, somebody will be
Yeah, I
loving
mean,
it.
she's pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
Very what I can do.
Yeah, from there. Well, okay, so you've got, how many kids do you have? Three? Oh, two. I just have one wall, he's 11. Yes, yes, and I just dread, I just want the car keys and money. He still does, he already does that. What'd you do in school? Nothing. Really? You sat there and did nothing all day long? Y'all can be seated. We'll bang something when the court goes back to session. The jury and I are just conversing up here. You know, I've never been able to get into basketball. I think it was because I'm so short. I just don't care. I guess they're good. Yeah. I'm off now. Football all day, but you just take what you can and you get it. All right, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there anything before counsel for the defense begins its case?
Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Counsel for the defense, you can proceed when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Danny Kosak to the stand. Your Honor, before I begin, may I retrieve exhibits from the bench
Sure.
that have been admitted?
What would you like?
Exhibit 23 specifically.
Exhibit 23, here it is. I also have an expert report for Dr. Hawkins. I don't know where this came from. I believe, yes, I believe this belongs to you. Would you like this back as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Can I proceed?
You may.
Please introduce yourself.
Hey, everyone, my name is Danny Kosak.
And, Danny, what do you do for a living?
Well, I used to live the dream, you know. I owned and operated my own animal sanctuary right here in Midlands, but now I work for an animal sanctuary in Ohio, and it's pretty cool, but nothing like my old job.
What happened to the Midlands Animal Sanctuary?
Well, I mean, we were really doing a lot of good stuff there. We had countless animals, great staff, great facilities, but ultimately, after what happened on June 29th, we just couldn't recover. We had to be shut down.
Ms. Kosak, let's talk a little bit about your experience with training animals. How many animals have you trained?
Oh man, I don't even know how to count that. Well, whenever I was about 3 years old, my family adopted a cow, so I guess that would make it 55, but you don't count that one, 54.
And how many animals did you train for the events in question today?
I just trained one. He was my best friend, Elias, the chimpanzee.
How much time did you spend training Elias?
So I probably in all spent, I don't know, much upwards of 500 hours training Elias. I like to say he was my longest relationship and my only relationship.
How much time did you specifically spend on Elias for stress and public appearance?
For that, because, Elias was becoming a bit of a big shot, getting a lot of recognition, I spent about 150 hours.
How much time did you spend with Elias for this performance specifically?
Well, we had some big stuff planned. It was really going to be exciting. So Elias was going to do all the tricks he's used to, but instead of from verbal commands, I was going to give him hand signals. And for that, I spent an additional 8 hours.
How did you train Elias?
So I would start out with continuous positive reinforcement, which might sound a little confusing, a bit scary, but pretty much what it means is I would naturally get Elias to do a trick, and every time he would do it, he would get a treat. Now, this is pretty common in animal training, and then what I would move on to is fixed ratio positive reinforcement, which pretty much just means every 4th time he does a trick, he gets a treat.
Ms. Kosak, let's talk a little bit about Midlands Television Studios. When did you first get the idea to appear on Midlands After Dark?
Well, Elias was, really getting some good screen time, and people were really loving what he was doing, and he was just the greatest. So I thought, hey, we should be on a late show. People would love that. So I reached out to Miss Alex Grace and Midlands After Dark in around 2016, I would say, but I didn't hear anything back from her until about a year later.
When she did respond, what did you talk about?
Well, I was overjoyed that the Midlands After Dark team responded, obviously. This was going to be huge for Elias, and I knew we were going to do great. So we discussed some logistics, decided on a date, and I was put in contact with the talent booker, Jameson Clark.
What steps did you do to provide safety?
So I have my safety practices that, pretty much foolproof. You follow those guidelines. all is
Objection, Your
well.
Honor, to improper opinion that her guidelines were pretty much foolproof. And I guess speculation as well, Your Honor.
So there's been an objection on speculation and improper opinion response.
Your Honor, this is not an improper opinion, as every time in the past when the guidelines were followed, she can rationally see, based off of her own experience, that the guidelines, without fail, resulted in a safe environment for the set. She has also experienced that the only times that anything did go wrong, the guidelines were not followed.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think it's within this witness's zone.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. But basically what I was saying is my guidelines were essentially foolproof. If they were all followed, all was well. And the only time things ever went south is when other people would break those guidelines.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has already been entered as Exhibit 23.
You may.
Now, Ms. Kosak, I've just handed you Exhibit 23. What are these?
So these are my safety guidelines for upcoming visits. I use them for every show, every performance that I went on, like I said, because they were very effective.
And what did you do with these?
Well, I sent them to the Midlands After Dark team, of course. I sent them to Jameson Clark, informing that everyone should get these, and it's even one of the guidelines to make sure everyone has read this handout. It's number 15 in bold.
Ms. Kosak, let's move on to talk about the day in question, June 29th, 2017. Could you please describe how that day began?
It's an exciting day for me. We'd done a lot of big stuff, but nothing this big. So I got there a bit early, around 11 o'clock. I wanted to answer questions if anyone had any, and, just make sure that Elias was as accustomed as he could be to our dressing room, at least. But I wasn't really put in contact with much of anyone. Alex Grace did come to see me in my dressing room about half an hour later.
When Alex Grace came to speak with you, what did you talk about?
Well, Miss Grace was slurring her speech a little bit, but we ultimately just talked about the logistics. And she kept asking if she could touch Elias, which absolutely not. Of course she couldn't touch Elias. That was my job as the animal trainer, and no one else was to touch him.
What were the plans for the dress rehearsal that was scheduled to be held?
So it was going to start out as we had planned it. It was going to be Alex Grace, myself, and Elias all accompanying Miss Grace on her host stand. Miss Grace would give her monologue, I would stay up there a bit, and then I would step down once cued, and it would just be Elias and Miss Grace up on the host table, just like Elias was giving a real interview. I mean, it was going to be adorable.
Now, Ms. Kosak, let's talk about the dress rehearsal itself. How did that begin?
Well, this is pretty hard to go over, but it really started out as planned. Things were going well. Then, Miss Grace asked a question. I gave a hand signal, and Elias kind of jumped up in his seat and started screaming a bit. I instructed everyone to stay calm, and I started to slowly approach Elias, which is how I would calm him down. But Miss Grace just all of a sudden reached towards Elias. And after that, Elias charged.
Ms. Kosak, I'm sorry this may be hard for you to describe, but what happened next?
Well, after Alex Grace reached towards Elias, that was it. He ran towards a group of riders and ultimately started attacking one of the riders, who I later found out was Chris Villafana. And I just want to say that I am so sorry to Chris and Chris's family. I can't imagine what they're going through, but if the guidelines would have been followed, that would have never happened.
What did you do with Elias after Chris Villafana was attacked?
Well, I didn't want him to hurt anyone else, so I locked him in a room. And then whenever I was walking back to set, I saw these doors wide open to set, and it was a craft table filled with food, and that was in direct violation of my guidelines. I had no idea that table was right there, right near the set.
Ms. Kosak, I'm going to refer you to these guidelines that you sent to Midlands After Dark. How many of these guidelines, to your knowledge, were breached by Midlands After Dark?
Well, the smell of food, Alex Grace reaching towards Elias, and then not even giving us time for Elias to acclimate to the set. That's at least 3. And even breaking one could be dangerous.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time, and I now tender this witness for cross-examination.
All right, cross-examination.
Your Honor, permission to set up the well for a visual aid.
Okay.
Ms. Kosak,
Your Honor,
I've already stated, once that is used, you can reposition. But don't reposition until any of it is actually used.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kosak. Now, you were just talking about a food buffet that you found was outside of the set, right?
Yeah, it was right behind these doors, which led directly to the set.
You'd agree with me that you never told the studio to move that food buffet, right?
Well, no, because I had no idea it was there. If I would have known, I would have told them.
And Ms. Kosak, your guidelines, they don't say anything about how far away food needs to be from a chimpanzee. Isn't that right?
Well, no, I don't specify the distance, but it clearly says that the smell of food is very confusing for Elias. And I had no idea there was food right near the set.
So your guidelines never say that there can't be food near the set. Isn't that right?
Not in those words particularly, but it does say that the smell of food is very confusing, which would include the presence of food, which couldn't be near Elias.
Ms. Kosak, this is a picture of the chimpanzee that you brought onto Midlands After Dark, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my best friend Elias. I really miss him.
You'd agree with me that your chimpanzee was male, right?
Yeah, he surely was, and
Ms. Kosak, you've heard of multiple instances of attacks involving male chimpanzees, haven't you?
I guess it depends on what your view of multiple is. I have heard of some attacks, yes.
Ms. Kosak, you've heard of 4 or 5 attacks involving male chimpanzees, right?
Oh, yeah, I have.
You've never heard of a female chimpanzee attacking anyone?
Well, no, but I don't keep up much in the news, and plus, I mean, I love animals so much, I don't go digging into all the negative details that could exist out there.
Ms. Kosak, you'd also agree with me that older, more developed chimpanzees are more likely to attack people.
Well, to back up, when a chimpanzee perceives a threat, they kind of assess that threat, and if they perceive that they are stronger than their threat, they can attack. So if that's what you're asking, yes, but it's all due to their perception of threat.
Ms. Kosak, I'm just asking whether or not older, more developed chimpanzees are more likely to get violent.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overruled.
So Ms. Kosak, that was yes to my question. Older, more developed chimpanzees are more likely to get violent, right?
Well, like I said, it's all about the perception of threat. So if you're talking about them perceiving a certain threat and assessing that they can beat that threat, then yes, but it's all about the threat.
Ms. Kosak, your chimpanzee was through puberty, right?
I believe so. I can't be entirely sure, but I do believe so.
Your chimpanzee had fully developed canines, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had been through puberty. He was a big boy.
He had fully developed fingernails.
Yeah, I never noticed any abnormalities with any of his physique. He was a healthy guy.
He had fully developed muscle strength, right?
Yeah, like I said, Elias was a healthy and happy chimp.
Your chimpanzee was much stronger than the average adult.
Yes, that's probably true.
You knew that if your chimpanzee decided to attack someone, it would be unstoppable.
Well, yes, but that's wild animals for you. I had done extensive training on Elias to prepare him for performances.
Ms. Kosak, you said that once a chimpanzee has decided to fight, there's nothing you can do. They're too strong. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, but like I said, that's wild animals for you.
Ms. Kosak, you said
can
that
only do so much training to prevent an attack.
Ms. Kosak, you said that Chris never stood a chance. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Ms.
And
Kosak,
like I said, it's because you can only do so much training. It's a wild animal.
Ms. Kosak, you never told the studio that if your chimpanzee decided to kill someone, you couldn't stop it.
That is because I sent these guidelines and they were to be followed. If all of these guidelines were followed, nothing bad would have happened.
Those guidelines don't say that your chimpanzee could kill someone, do they?
Well, no, because like I said, if all of these guidelines were followed, nothing bad would have happened.
Ms. Kosak, now I'd like to talk to you about how this chimpanzee was behaving in the hours leading up to the rehearsal. You'd agree with me that your chimpanzee got upset 3 separate times that morning.
Yeah, Elias was acting a little cranky that morning, but it was nothing of worry.
Your chimpanzee left multiple scratches on your arm.
Yeah, he gave me a little scratches, but that sounds a lot worse than it is. I'm sure most people here have pets, and we've gotten some scratches from our cats and dogs. It was nothing to worry about.
Just to be clear, that was a yes. He left multiple scratches on your arm.
Yes, harmless little scratches.
Your chimpanzee had been screaming all morning.
Yeah, like I said, he was a little bit cranky that day, but nothing of any worry. I knew Elias well.
Your chimpanzee was still upset 30 minutes before the rehearsal was supposed to start.
Yes, like I've said multiple times, I mean, Elias was a little cranky that day, but nothing of any worry. I knew Elias very well, and I knew his behaviors.
Ms. Kosak, despite the fact that this chimpanzee got upset 3 times in the morning of the rehearsal, you still decided to go ahead with the show.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Elias was ready, he was well trained, and the show would go on because of those things.
Well, let's talk about why you decided to go ahead with that. You'd agree with me that you were desperate to go through with this show.
I'm not necessarily, I would agree that I did really want to be on the show, but I didn't need to desperately be on the show.
But you didn't need to be on the show, isn't that right?
Well, yes, I did want to be on the show.
Ms. Kosak, I'm not asking if you wanted to be on the show, I'm asking if you needed to be on the show. You needed to be on the show, isn't that right?
Yes, like I've said multiple times. And I mean, of course I wanted Elias to appear on the show.
Ms. Kosak, your animal sanctuary was very close to going out of business, wasn't it?
Yeah, we weren't doing too well. I don't really know what's going on. I guess people don't care about animals like they used to.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of the bank statements from the animal sanctuary. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Ms. Kosak, that's a copy of your bank statements.
Yes.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way.
Doesn't appear to be so, no.
It's a fair and accurate copy.
I would say so.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd offer Exhibit 21 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. We have no objections pursuant to Stipulation 16, which says that all objections to the admissibility of Exhibit 21 are waived.
Okay, then this is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to approach the bench with a courtesy copy and publish up on the jury.
You may.
Ms. Kosak, the year before the appearance on Midlands After Dark, you had been losing money every month.
You're talking about 2016?
I'm talking about the year, the 12 months leading up to the June 29th appearance.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, people just didn't care about animals anymore. We weren't doing the best financially.
Ms. Kosak, you'd agree with me that you started out that year with over $200,000 in your bank account.
2017?
You started the 12 months before the appearance with over $200,000 in your bank account. That's on the first page, right?
Oh, yes.
And then on the very last page, the month of the appearance, the day before the appearance, you had a little over $5,000 in your account.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the sanctuary just wasn't seeing as much money as it was used to.
Ms. Kosak, you lost over $200,000 in 1 year, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I never wanted to make any budget cuts because the animals and their happiness and health was so important to me. So I decided we should keep operating as if funds were abundant. So that led to funds going down.
Ms. Kosak, just to be clear, you lost over $200,000 in 1 year.
Yeah, because like I said, I wanted the sanctuary to still be functioning properly.
Ms. Kosak, you wrote that you needed to appear on Midlands After Dark because it would literally save your sanctuary and your career. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Elias was getting a lot of really good publicity, and I thought that Elias appearing on the show would lead to a few more donors.
Ms. Kosak, you needed this publicity immediately in order to save your sanctuary, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, as these statements show, funds were not looking too pretty, so I did need, some more donors to come in.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Permission to approach the witness and retrieve evidence. Has this been retrieved from the bench?
Your Honor, permission to republish
That's, yes.
And Your Honor, we ask that the witness be allowed to step down.
Okay, you may step down. Now, for the defense, when you're ready, call your next witness.
At this time, defense calls Ashley Thornhill to the stand.
May I proceed? Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, I'm Ashley Thornhill.
What do you do for a living, Miss Thornhill?
Well, the thing that I'm the most proud of is being a gammy or grandmother to my 5 grandchildren. I hate the word grandmother. And I know you're probably thinking, how could I look like this and be a grandmother? Well, let's just say that being the makeup artist for Alex Grace, I kind of get a buy one, get one half off deal with Botox, so it has its perks.
You mentioned Alex Grace. How do you know her?
Well, I have known Alex Grace for all of my marriages, so I've known her for a long time. I was her makeup artist / personal assistant.
What types of things did you typically do as personal assistant to Alex Grace?
Well, as personal assistant and makeup artist, I basically made sure she was where she was supposed to be, when she was supposed to be there, and looking the best that she possibly could while she was there.
And what was your relationship with Miss Grace like?
Well, let's just say I've known her for several of her 29th birthdays, and I know that she has been, I've known her long enough to understand that our relationship was good when her show was doing well. And when it wasn't, let's just say we both got a lot of frown lines that we itemize on our tax returns.
How did it affect you when the show wasn't doing well?
You know, after her first show on for Midland's Television Studios, her cooking show, was canceled, we were both almost pushed to the edge of a mental breakdown. And after Midland's After Dark's initial rating surge, it seemed like we were pushed to that same edge again. And Alex seemed to think that she had to do something big to save her career and the show.
What do you mean, something big?
Look, Alex may not look like it because she's had plenty of help to have that face, but she has been around in the business for long enough to understand that scandal breeds ratings. It's like the one time that she kicked a writer during a pre-show rehearsal.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, they're offering this testimony of Alex Grace doing something drastic to start a scandal in the past to make it sound like it was more likely that she was going to be doing something drastic on the day of the show to boost ratings. It's textbook propensity and it's not admissible.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, this is admissible because it falls under an exception to character evidence under Rule 404B2, which states that it's admissible to show motive, plan, intent, or lack of accident. We're offering this to show that Alex Grace intended to do something big to save her show and that her actions on the 29th were not an accident.
What's your response on this motive exception?
Your Honor, they're not talking about an incident that happened leading up to the show. They're talking about an incident that happened in the past. Alex Grace doing something to one of her writers in the past to gain ratings, that doesn't have anything to do with the show on June 29th. It's not, her motive in the past cannot be used to predict motive now. That's propensity. We're not saying that anything going to her motive for the June 29th performance would be propensity. We're saying that what happened in the past cannot be used to predict that she would have a motive now.
Counsel, what's your response on this propensity argument?
Yes, Your Honor. The motive is the same because it's for Midland's After Dark concerning the ratings of Midland's After Dark. The motive is the same because it was to raise the ratings of Midland's After Dark.
I think the objection is well made. I think this is a propensity argument, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
And proceed without going into that area.
Let's move forward to the 29th. What was scheduled to happen at Midland's Television Studio?
So there was a chimpanzee scheduled to be on the show that day.
How did Midland's After Dark prepare for this appearance?
Honestly, I prepared more for a routine facial rejuvenation than Midland's After Dark did for this show. I mean, there was supposed to be a safety meeting, and it never even happened.
Do you know why the safety meeting never occurred?
You know, I can't say for sure, but I do remember Jamison Clark going up to Alex Grace and telling her that there needed to be a safety meeting for the show. And Alex Grace just dismissed it by saying, oh yeah, sure, but never confirmed that there would be one, and there never was.
How did you personally prepare for the 29th?
You know, outside of a couple of Bumble dates, I really didn't have anything to do before the show.
Did you have any interaction with the guests leading up to the 29th?
Yes, so I did get a phone call leading up to the show, and it was from an unidentified number. I answered it. I thought it might have been one of my Tinder dates. I mean, I should have known better. They never called me back. But I answered it, and it was Danny Kozak, and she was talking very quickly, and she seemed very nervous about bringing Elias onto the show. And that's when I told her that, you know, Alex Grace and I might have the same plastic surgeon, but we're not the same person, and I referred her to Alex Grace.
And do you know if Miss Kozak and Miss Grace spoke?
Yes, so when Alex Grace came back the next day, I mentioned the phone call to her. You know, I was a little nervous about bringing a chimpanzee onto the show. I spent a lot of money on this space and I did not want it to be ruined by a chimpanzee. And that's when Alex Grace told me that if something were to go wrong with Elias, then it was all the better for the Midlands.
Did Midlands After Dark do anything else to prepare for Miss Cosat's performance?
No.
Okay, then let's move to the 29th itself. What did you do on that day?
So on that day, I had to escort Danny and Elias to their dressing room because kind of like Rob Kardashian on season 2 of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Alex Grace was nowhere to be found. So I had to step into her role, escort them to their dressing room, and that's when he must have mistaken me for an executive assistant because she handed me a stack of guidelines to pass out.
What did you do with those guidelines?
Look, as I've said before, I was her personal assistant and her makeup artist. I didn't have the time to pass out the guidelines, so I delegated it to someone who could, Chris Villafana.
Do you know if those guidelines ever got passed out?
I'm not sure. However, when I was cleaning up Alex Grace's dressing room later that day, I saw a stack of the same guidelines, and they were untouched.
What happened after you found the untouched guidelines?
Well, I picked up the guidelines. I wanted to make sure everything was okay for the show. I walked out into the hallway, and that's when I saw Alex Grace.
What did Miss Grace do when she saw you holding those guidelines?
Oh my goodness. So I walked out, and she saw I had the guidelines, and she snatched them out of my hands, and she looked at me and said, "For what it's worth, your time at MTS is over." So she fired me after she saw the guidelines.
Had you spoken to Miss Grace other than that on that day?
Yes. So when earlier that day I had been doing her makeup, and she was saying the most unusual thing. She was talking about a hairdresser bit, and she was worried if Elias would be too agitated for it, and she kept talking about it, and then she said that Elias would be perfect for the hairdresser bit.
Miss Thornhill, what is the hairdresser bit?
Honestly, I have no idea. If it's from her show, I see enough of Alex Grace in the makeup department. I don't really watch her shows, so I can't testify about what the hairdresser bit was, just that she said it was perfect for the show, and Elias would be perfect for it.
And what did Miss Grace say after she said Elias would be perfect for the hairdresser bit?
Well, we were having a little bit of banter, and she was being a little snarkier than usual, and I made a comment about her being replaced, because there was someone with less Botox and less experience gunning for her job, Landon Green. And that's when she looked at me, Kim K. Dramatic, and said that she would rather let our show die than be replaced as host.
No further questions. I tender the witness for cross-examination.
Cross-examination.
On the record, you said that you found the stack of safety guidelines and they looked untouched.
Yes, that's correct.
But I just want to be clear, you know that every single MTS employee had already received those guidelines in an email days before.
Yes, it was sent out in a listserv. Everyone got it, like we got several other emails from MTS.
So everyone had received those guidelines, even though you didn't pass them out?
Everyone that was on that listserv had, but like I said, I was asked to pass out those guidelines, and I don't know if they were, but that stack of guidelines was as untouched as my face was in my 20s.
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about your relationship with Alex Grace and MTS.
Now, you moved to Midlands to work for Alex Grace.
Yes, I did.
And you felt like your stock dropped after that.
Not right after that. I mean, I was accustomed to Beverly Hills, so Midlands was an adjustment. But when I was promoted to personal assistant, that's kind of when things changed.
You believed you were seen as damaged goods.
Yes, like I said, I came to be the head of the makeup department, and I ended up being demoted to personal assistant. But as I say, life is like a lip injection. You're never really sure what you're going to get, so I understand.
In fact, you felt misled to Midlands by Miss Grace.
Absolutely. I mean, I was offered a job that I didn't get.
And then Alex Grace fired you.
Yes, several years later.
And you still don't know why.
Outside of her seeing the guidelines in my hand, no.
Miss Grace, you and Alex Grace don't, Miss Thornhill, you and Alex Grace don't talk much anymore.
No. After I was fired and she wasn't my boss anymore, we don't really talk.
Exactly. You're okay with not talking with Alex Grace much anymore.
I mean, yeah, she was my boss, she's not anymore, we don't have a relationship anymore.
Because you believe that the chapter of your life spent with Miss Grace was the worst chapter of your professional life.
It's a bit dramatic, but yes.
In fact, it's a chapter of your life you said you were glad to leave behind.
Yes. I am a very talented makeup artist, and I know that I will find a different star who's more grateful and has a younger face to work for.
Now, a few weeks after the attack, you told Harper Villafana that you wanted to get even with Alex Grace and
Your Honor,
MTS.
this is hearsay.
Response.
Your Honor, this is an exception to hearsay under Rule 8033, plan, intent, motive. It specifically shows that she had an intention to get back at Alex Grace.
Response.
Your Honor, if it does qualify under Rule 8033, the foundation has not yet been laid.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
What foundation have you laid?
Me?
Yes.
I've asked her if, I said that she, was simply the statement that she wanted to get even with Alex Grace and MTS. Saying that she wants to get even is showing that she had an intention to get back at them.
This is presumably with regard to statements she made to the deceased's widow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection and allow you to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, a few weeks after the attack, you told Harper Villafana that you wanted to get even with Alex Grace and the studio.
Yes, so I was unemployed. I think I'd been watching a few too many episodes of Keeping Up with the Kardashians because I was a little extra dramatic that day. And I told her that I wanted to get even. But what I really meant is that I wanted justice for Chris. I mean, I worked with Chris for so long, and I was very upset that Chris had passed away.
You didn't just say that, Ms. Thornhill. You said you would do anything for revenge.
Such as telling the truth here today, and that I would tell how Alex said that she would rather let the show die than be replaced, and how she did everything by ratings, without caring for the safety.
Ms. Thornhill, you said that you would do anything to get even with Alex Grace.
Yes, like tell the truth here today.
Ms. Thornhill, you said you would do anything to get even with her, and now you're testifying against Alex Grace voluntarily, the one who fired you.
Objection to compound questioning.
I'm going to overrule it. I don't think it's compound.
After saying that you would do anything to get even with Alex Grace, you're testifying voluntarily against her in court today.
I am here today, but that doesn't mean that I'm perjuring myself. I was upset at a funeral, and I was upset with Alex Grace, but I'm here today, and I'm less upset in telling exactly what happened.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Now, Your Honor, I ask at this time that the witness will be excused.
Okay. Let's step down. Okay, do we have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Hunter Cooper.
And this is your last witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Cooper, as I said, the price is right. Come on down.
May I proceed?
You may.
Would you please introduce yourself to the court?
Well, first I want to give a big hello to Alex and everyone else, of course. But my name is Hunter Cooper.
And what is it you do for a living, Miss Cooper?
Well, primarily I am a screenwriter, but I do all sorts of odd jobs. Celebrity impersonator, I do a really good Joan Rivers, and my favorite job I actually had was as a Hollywood tour guide.
And why is it you're here today?
Well, I'm here because of Alex Grace. I was actually conducting my research on her for a documentary when the incident occurred.
And are you being subpoenaed to be in court today?
No, I'm just here to tell the truth about Alex.
Now, can you please tell us, were you on set of Midlands After Dark on June 29th?
Yes, I was. Like I said, I was doing my research. So my usual spot that I sit in is under the seating in the front of the audience section of the set.
Now, what did doing your research entail?
Right. So my research, I like to be very thorough, so I keep a notepad of everything that happens, and I basically just make sure that I'm keeping up with everything Alex does.
And you said you were in your usual spot on the 29th? Where was that?
I was, like I said, it was under the seating in the front of the audience section of the Midlands After Dark set.
And did anybody stop you when you were entering the building for Midlands After Dark?
Oh no, that would compromise the research. I mean, I really have to make sure that I go undiscovered. I have to make sure that I am just a fly on the wall watching everything.
And what were you able to see from your spot on the 29th?
Well, everything, of course. I mean, that's why I chose that spot, because it had such a good view of the whole set.
And who did you observe on set that day?
Right. So when I came in, I heard talk that there was going to be an animal act on the show. And I was like, oh my goodness, I love animals. My dog Thor is my very best friend. And I was really excited and found out that the animal trainer, Danny Kosak, was there.
And can you please tell us a little bit about Danny Kosak?
Right. So Danny had so many questions for Alex. I mean, if it was me, I would just want to bask in Alex's presence and, just be so thankful to be there. But it seemed to me that Kosak had a lot of demands.
And what do you mean by a lot of demands?
Well, she just kept complaining. She was very eager to ask questions and make demands. And she basically complained about how there was food too close to the set and there being too many people and it being too loud and things like that. But, Alex was just so gracious.
And what do you mean by Alex was so gracious in that instance?
Well, she is such an angel. She can do no wrong, of course. But she was basically like, sure, we'll accommodate. But she seemed a little bit more focused on whether or not she could have a certain level of contact with Elias, the chimpanzee. That's how she basically responded to Kosak's questions. Kosak was just asking Alex, you read the guidelines, right? And Alex was like, rules and guidelines are different. I'm not sure what she meant by that, but, she said something about having to improvise.
And can you please tell us what else you saw that day?
Right, so I love rehearsals because there's no audience there. I really get to see everything. And when the rehearsal started, Danny Kosak came on holding Elias's hand. Alex did her interview, and then her monologue, excuse me. And then they started the interview with the chimpanzee Elias.
And how did this interview go?
It seemed really cute to me. Like I said, I love animals. And basically, Alex was asking the chimpanzee questions. And eventually, Danny Kosak, who was sitting next to Elias, got up and walked off the stage and started doing some sort of resistance to Elias, which he seemed to be responding to.
And what was Alex Grace doing when Danny Kosak walked away?
Alex kept asking questions to Elias, like he was a regular guest on the show. It was really cute.
And can you please tell us what happened once Alex started asking Elias questions by herself?
Oh, okay. So I'm sure you all know Alex's most famous bit, her hairdresser bit, most famously done on the President of the United States, of course. It's where she leans in and kind of ruffles the hair of her guest.
Objection, Your Honor, to improper character evidence.
How is that character evidence?
Your Honor, the witness, if I may make an offer of proof.
No, just tell me why it's character evidence for her to testify about a bit that is commonly known, done by your client.
Yes, Your Honor. She's testifying to past actions of the defendant, or rather of Alex Grace, to imply action in conformity therewith. Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Now, can you please explain what Alex Grace did once Danny Kosak left?
So Alex, like I said, started asking questions to Elias. I wish she would ask questions like that about me, but Elias was the guest that day. And she asked him, oh, Elias, do you use the same hairdresser as the president? And like I said, what I think she was referring to is her famous bit where she ruffled the hair of the president. And I thought it was a toupee, not gonna lie, but it was real. And she has done that with so many of her guests. So when she asked that question, she leaned in, and that's when Elias started freaking out and jumping up and down and screaming.
And what was Danny Kosak doing when the incident happened?
To me, it seemed that Danny was very calm, surprisingly. Like, first of all, I wouldn't be that calm if I was around Alex Grace, but given the fact that there was a screaming monkey, Danny just seemed very calm and told everyone to not make any sudden movements or anything like that. I don't recall exactly what she said.
And what is it you saw Alex Grace do just before the attack?
Oh yeah, that's when Alex leaned in to do the hairdresser bit.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor. I tender my witness for cross-examination.
Okay, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cooper, on the morning of the rehearsal, the defendant walked past you at one point, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the defendant walked past you, you heard her talking to herself.
Yeah, I know. I talk to myself too, so I guess that's what Danny was doing.
You heard her say, maybe it's too soon.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what she meant by that. I mean, could have been anything.
She said, it can't be like last time.
You're saying her words correctly, yes.
She said, I can give him something to get through this. We need to get through this.
Yes.
And then you heard her change her tone a little bit.
Yes, I would say so.
You heard her say, thank goodness no one's going to be here at this rehearsal.
Yes.
The defendant said, if something does go wrong, Grace deserves whatever Grace gets. Isn't that right?
Well, personally, I think Grace deserves only the best, but that is what Kosak said.
Now, after that conversation, you noticed that the defendant didn't have any bandages on her arms, right?
Early on in the day, Danny Kosak did not have any bandages on her arms.
But after she said all that, she left to go get her chimpanzee for the rehearsal.
Yes,
As she came back with the chimpanzee,
she did.
you notice she had a bandage on her left forearm. Isn't that right?
Yes, she did. I'm not exactly sure why, but she did.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to read Stipulation 18 onto the record. Your Honor, both parties agree on June 29, 2017, following the animal attack resulting in the death of Chris Filifana, on-scene EMTs treated Danny Kosak's left forearm for an injury consistent with an animal bite. Treatment of the injury required a total of 18 stitches. Ms. Cooper, you saw the defendant with those bandages on her left forearm right as the rehearsal started.
I did. I think that, if I had anything wrong with my arm, I'd want to cover it up too.
That performance began and things were going okay for a little bit.
Yeah, it was really cute, like I said.
But then that chimpanzee stood up in its chair and started screaming.
I know, it was so horrible. I was really, really scared for Alex in that moment.
I want to be clear on this point, ma'am. You never saw Alex Grace reach her hand out toward the chimpanzee.
I saw her lean in. That's what I saw.
But that's a yes to my question. You never saw Alex Grace reach her hand out toward the chimpanzee.
Not specifically, no.
But you did see that chimpanzee jump off the chair and attack and kill Chris Filifano.
Yeah, she's a UChicago alum and so am I, so I felt really, really disheartened by the death of such a wonderful writer who put such beautiful words in the mouth of Alex Grace.
Shortly after that, you saw the defendant walking around the set.
I did. After the attack, it appeared to me that Danny Kosak, after Elias had run into the sound booth, Danny was trying to make sure that Elias stayed in there until the EMTs arrived.
Ma'am, you heard her talking to herself again.
Yeah, I guess she was talking to herself again.
She admitted it was foolish for her to have gone on with the rehearsal that day.
She was muttering a little bit, so I can't be completely sure, but that's what I heard.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
No, Your Honor. I asked my witness to be able to step down.
Now get excused. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break before closings. How long do we have for closings?
The trial started at 3:13, so we have about 40 minutes.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
All right, how long are each of you going to take for your closings?
9 minutes.
Okay.
Also 9 minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. All right, let's reconvene at 5:30 by this clock.
Yes, Your Honor. May I retrieve some exhibits for use for closing?
I'll do the math and stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just need to write everything down because I prefer on a notepad.
I mean, this is for our personal record, anyway, like I said.
Yeah, I don't feel like any time issue. Nobody ran out of time.
Yeah, if you go up to the second floor, Yeah, just.
I gotta get that. Not anything like that.
Go up to the second floor, and then if you take those stairs or the elevator right up to this room, go to the left, there's a little.
Second floor, you said?
Yeah, there's right, kind of right, almost right above us, there's a.
You need that?
waiting room. I'm good, thank you though. You know, I do too, and I have, every time that I say, oh, I'm gonna drink one Coke Zero a day this week, and that's like my whole thing, I just find that that's all I do, is just drink it all day long. I mean, and then I tell myself, hey, stop lying, you know, and I'm like, that's really bad. But that's what I tell myself, of all the bad habits I could have so many worse habits.
Yeah, it's not the one I have.
It's not fun either. But I find the excuses I give to myself frequently are really bad excuses. But I do it, and I fall for it every time. So, yeah. All right. Don't forget we gotta Probably
Oh, yeah,
right
yeah,
from the
yeah,
decision.
I like to take notes.
Yeah. Very fast. Y'all can be seated, we're not in session.
Sure.
So can we like let you use our stopwatches so yours doesn't keep going off?
We already fixed this
You
one.
already fixed it?
The other one went out. I apologize.
Can I see both bailiffs up here? real quick?
Yeah, of course. Sure. I apologize for that disturbance, by the way.
That's what I want to make.
Russian hackers probably or something.
I want to make sure, I don't know where the noise is coming from, but I want to make sure that that beeping is not. Okay, do we have it fixed?
It will not continue. The
Okay,
problem
cool.
has been remedied,
Awesome.
and
Okay.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. I would not want it to be happening during closing because it could affect a lot of
Yes.
performance.
I hid it in a box. I'll just take it out of the room. That way there's literally no chance.
Okay, you hit it in a box.
I hid it in a box in case we.
I have absolutely no idea.
I hate stopwatches for that reason, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
y'all
a
are
lot
fine.
to use both,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but we know, so we know we're good. All right,
And every
good.
time it feeds, I just
Yeah.
press turn it on.
Yeah, let's just not have it be.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome, thanks, guys.
Yep,
Okay,
no
thank you.
problem. Thank you, Your Honor.
I am, I'm getting mean, aren't I? I know, like, I can't handle the beat.
It's a common mistake, don't worry, it happens to me all the time.
I don't know how it happened.
I don't know, it's just like an issue with the product.
It's very weird.
It just like it just starts going off.
I mean, this is like practically like primitive technology.
It really is. I mean, I
It's
wish
like-
that Anthem would come up with something else.
Seriously.
I hate stopwatches. Because they just
Yeah.
mind of their own. Okay, we all back? Okay, are we ready to proceed with closings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, proceed when ready.
Your Honor, just to make sure I have the time allotted, permission to reserve up to 2 minutes for rebuttal.
That's fine.
May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court? Ms. Schott, members of the jury, may it please the court. Do it right or don't do it at all. Members of the jury, this is the end the defendant chose to bring to Midlands after dark. He's an adult male chimpanzee with fully grown nails, sharp canines, and a history of aggression. See, he's had problems on live sets in the past, and prior to this show, there were clear warning signs that this animal should have never taken the stage. But see, the defendant needed to perform. Her sanctuary was going out of business, and she believed that this chimpanzee's appearance on this show would save her business and her career, so she decided to bring him on, no matter what. And because of that decision, this chimpanzee attacked and killed a writer on set. And members of the jury, this tragedy never should have happened. Because when you've got a job as dangerous as the defendant's, you either do it right or you don't do it at all. And that's why we brought a claim of negligence against the defendant. Now, before this trial ever began, everyone agreed that the defendant had a legal responsibility to keep things safe for the studio, and that the studio suffered harm when their chimpanzee attacked. So as the judge is going to tell you in just a moment, we only had to show you 3 things to prove our claim. First, we had to show you that the defendant breached her legal duty to keep things safe on set by bringing an unreasonably dangerous animal on stage. Second, we had to prove direct and proximate causation to demonstrate that this was a foreseeable tragedy that never would have happened if the defendant had just done things right.
And third and finally, since the defense is countersuing, this is a case of comparative negligence. So we just have to show you that the defendant was more responsible for the attack than the student. And if we can prove these things are more likely than not true, that makes the defendant liable for negligence. Members of the jury, that is a burden we have more than met today because we proved that when the defendant picked an animal to bring on this show, she didn't do it right, and so she shouldn't have done it at all. Now, Dr. Hawkins told you exactly how the defendant didn't do this right, because she picked an unreasonably dangerous animal. See, as Dr. Hawkins told you, you don't bring a male chimpanzee on set because 90% of chimpanzee attacks are committed by more aggressive male chimpanzees. You don't bring an adult, fully developed chimpanzee on set because it's only at that point that chimpanzees develop the muscles, the claws, the teeth to kill someone if they choose. And you certainly don't bring a live animal on set that's had other aggressive incidents on set before. Members of the jury, we've heard nothing to contradict the science Dr. Hawkins provided you on the stand. Instead, the defendant admitted on the stand that older, more developed chimpanzees like hers are more likely to attack, and that if this chimpanzee chose to fight, he would be unstoppable. That's why Dr. Hawkins told you that chimpanzees like these should be retired from live performance. Because if a chimpanzee is predisposed to aggression, if it's capable of killing someone, it shouldn't be given the chance. That'd be dangerous. It would be unreasonable. And it would be negligent. But members of the jury, that's not the only thing the defendant failed to do right. See, you've heard a lot today about the defendant's safety guidelines, but I want to focus on what they actually say. Right here at the top, the defendant says she's going to hold a safety meeting to clear up any questions the studio has about these guidelines. But the defendant never held that safety meeting. And the reason why that's so important is because, as Mrs. Grace told you on the stand today, without further instruction, all the studio thought they needed to do to keep things safe was to follow these guidelines as they were written. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, they complain about a food buffet that was in the studio that day, but the guidelines don't say you can't have food in the studio. They just say that no one meeting the chimpanzee can eat within an hour of doing so. And we learned today from Alex Grace, the only person who actually met that chimpanzee that day, she hadn't eaten that entire day. And then they spent some time talking about how Alex Grace allegedly reached out toward the chimpanzee, but nowhere in these 15 guidelines was that ever prohibited. They told you things about how these guidelines should have been followed that the defendant never told the studio. Members of the jury, the defense had a legal burden today to prove that the studio actually broke the defendant's instructions. But if they can't prove that their client actually told the studio to keep these things away from her animal, then they can't prove negligence, and they don't have a case. Members of the jury, after selecting a dangerous animal, after never holding a safety meeting, the final reason the defendant didn't do this right was because she went on stage with a chimpanzee she knew was acting aggressively. I mean, the defense wants you to believe that something changed, that something triggered Elias on set, and that's why he reacted and attacked someone. But that story doesn't make sense, because this chimpanzee had been aggressive that entire day. From the screaming to the scratch and bite marks it left on its own trainer, this chimpanzee was acting aggressive all morning long. And the defendant tried to convince you that that's just normal for Elias. She got on the stand and said verbatim that Elias was a little cranky that morning, but it was nothing of any worry. Members of the jury, we know that's not true. Because the defense's own witness took the stand and told you that he heard the defendant admit that morning, maybe it's too soon, but we need to get through this. Thank goodness no one will be here for this rehearsal. If something does go wrong, Grace deserves whatever Grace gets. But still, the defendant chose to guarantee the studio that chimpanzee was ready to go and walk him out on set where he attacked and killed Chris Villafani. he admitted just moments later in front of that same witness that it was foolish for him to have gone on the performance that day. Members of the jury, the defendant had a legal duty to do this right, but he didn't, and she shouldn't have done it at all. None of this ever should have happened. Because you choose to take other people's lives in your hands. You either do it right, or you don't do it at all. Because her actions caused the cessation of the studio's biggest show and the end of Chris Villafana's life, we're confident that you'll hold the defendant liable for what she's done. Thank you for your time. Would opposing counsel like me to leave up any demonstratives?
Yes, the guidelines demonstrative.
Sure.
Permission to construct the relevant. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. When Mr. Fitzgerald got up here and told you do it right or don't do it at all, he was exactly right. But unfortunately, the plaintiff in today's case, Midland's television studio, didn't do it right. They cut corners because they were ruled by ratings. The case that you've heard today tells the story of a desperate television studio executive who would have done anything she had to do to save her failing TV show. Miss Grace was searching for a backstage scandal that would boost the ratings of her show. And when she discovered that she could have a performance by a live chimpanzee, that was a perfect opportunity and she seized it. The sad truth is, Danny and her chimpanzee Elias were just an opportunity for Miss Grace to raise her ratings. But Danny didn't know any of that. She was just excited to bring on her pal Elias onto a TV show and show him off to the world. When Miss Grace decided to do her famous hairdresser bit on Elias and reached towards Elias to ruffle his hair, there was nothing that Danny or anyone else could have done to stop the attack that occurred. Midland's television studio had been so ruled by the ratings that they completely ignored the safety guidelines Danny provided and behaved negligently. Now, because of those very events, both parties in today's case have brought forth a claim of negligence. In order to prove negligence, you have to prove 4 things: duty, breach, harm, and causation. Now, it has already been ruled upon that both parties in today's case owed each other a duty. And it's already been ruled upon that both parties suffered harm. That means that what we were arguing in court today was where the breach of the duty came from and who caused the harm. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it abundantly clear that Midland's television studio breached their duty when Alex Grace reached towards Elias and when they failed to follow the safety guidelines. And furthermore, we have shown you that that breach was the direct and proximate cause of the harm. If not for Miss Grace's and Midland's television studio's actions, Danny's sanctuary wouldn't have closed down, and Elias would still be doing performances today. Furthermore, we have shown these things to you by a preponderance of the evidence, which means they are more likely true than not. Now, Ms. Kosak also had a duty in today's case, and that duty was to ensure that Elias was properly trained and to otherwise take steps to ensure that his performance on the 29th would be safe. Now, you heard testimony from Ms. Kosak today. She had spent over 650 hours training Elias. Elias was very thoroughly trained for his performance on the 29th because she did additional training on top of his baseline training for that specific performance. Now, you've also heard a lot of talk about the different factors of Elias, including his age his gender. But those factors only matter if Elias were to perceive a threat and decide to attack. Ladies and gentlemen, if the plaintiff hadn't breached their duty, those factors never would have come into play because Elias never would have perceived a threat. Unfortunately, when Miss Grace reached towards Elias to do her hairdresser bit, Elias reacted because he was a chimpanzee. But that never would have happened if the guidelines that Miss Grace provided to Midland's television studio had been followed in the first place. Let's walk through some of the guidelines that Midland's television studio breached. Now, number 2, brush your teeth and wash your hands. The plaintiff claimed that they upheld this guideline, but it very clearly states the smell of food is very confusing for Elias. Midland's television studio knew this, but they still placed their food buffet directly across from where Elias was performing. Ms. Kozak also told you that they were not given proper time to settle in on the 23rd, on the 29th. And finally, make sure everyone has read this handout. We have heard no evidence today that Midland's television studio checked with their employees to make sure that their employees had read the handout. Furthermore, we heard no evidence that Midland's television studio took any steps to ensure that any of these guidelines were actually followed by all of their employees who were present on the day in question. Midland's television studio had a duty to follow every single one of the guidelines provided to them by Danny Kozak. But ladies and gentlemen, they failed in their duty. Now, we've heard that Alex Grace had a history of low ratings. We heard that she had a previous TV show that was canceled. And we know that the ratings on Midland's After Dark were the lowest that they had ever been going in to Danny and Elias's performance on the 29th. Now, when Danny Kozak arrived, she was readily available in her dressing room for several hours to answer any questions from any member of Midland's television studio. If nobody came to Ms. Kozak with any questions, that's not her fault. Not only did she provide guidelines for exactly how to behave around Elias, but she was available to correct any misunderstandings that anybody had. But unfortunately, Ms. Grace and nobody else at Midland's television studio came forward with any concerns, any questions about how to behave around Elias. This is not the responsibility of Ms. Kozak. She had a responsibility to behave reasonably on the 29th and leading up to it, and she did so. When Ms. Kozak assessed this situation when Elias became agitated, she immediately told everyone to remain calm. And she began to take steps to de-escalate the situation. Unfortunately, it was too late, because Ms. Alex Grace had already reached towards Elias. Now, you heard today about a letter that Ms. Alex Grace wrote the wife of Chris Villafana. This letter contains Alex Grace's true feelings about the incident that happened on the 29th. She said, "Sorry I let everyone down." She said, "Chris could still be here." She said, "Maybe if listened to rules or said yes to a different animal." Miss Grace knew that she broke the rules, and she admitted it in this letter. Miss Grace broke those rules because she was so concerned with raising her ratings. You saw in these emails that Miss Grace only booked Elias in the first place to achieve ratings gold. Now, when the interview started, Miss Grace thought it was a bit boring, and she realized she needed to do something to make the performance more interesting, to get that ratings gold that she so desperately craved. Unfortunately, what Miss Grace chose to do was reach towards Elias. And in doing that, and breaking the guidelines on this list, she failed in her duty. Because of that, we are confident that when you examine all the evidence that you have heard today and you enter your deliberations, you will return with the only verdict: that the evidence supports the law requires and justice demands by returning and finding for the defense and holding Midland's television studio liable. Thank you.
Rebuttal, Your Honor? Members of the jury, for the story Ms. Shai just told you to make sense, you have to believe a lot of things that just aren't true. Because let's say we ignore for a second the fact that the show was only 2 points down in the ratings. Let's say we ignore the fact that this rehearsal took place at a backstage incident where there wasn't a single camera rolling. Where's the evidence that Alex Grace actually reached toward the chimpanzee? The only person who was able to testify to that fact was the person on trial for negligence. In fact, the defense's own witness, Hunter Cooper, got on that stand and told you that she saw the whole rehearsal. She never saw Alex Grace reach her hand out toward the chimpanzee. Members of the jury, the whole story Ms. Shai told you just doesn't make sense, and it isn't supported by the evidence. The studio wasn't fooled by ratings. They understood that they had to follow those guidelines, and they did. The only thing that could have caused this attack was the actions of the defendant when she picked an animal that was dangerous for this performance and brought it on knowing it was aggressive. She didn't do this right, and she shouldn't have done it at all, and that's why she's lied. Thank you.
All right, this concludes our trial in this matter. If you'll give us just a moment to complete our score sheets, we'll call you back in and have a very quick conversation with you.
Yes, Your Honor.